I always delight to study the life of Daniel the prophet. The name Daniel means God is my judge. God is my judge. The public is not my judge, nor my fellow men, but God. So Daniel held himself responsible to God. Some may ask who Daniel was. About 600 years before the time of Christ, the sins of the kings of Judah had brought the judgments of God upon them and upon the people. Jehoiakim had succeeded Jehoahaz, and Jehoiachin had succeeded Jehoiakim, and he was succeeded by Zedekiah. The record of each of these kings runs the same, and he did evil in the sight of the Lord. 1 Kings 15:26. It is no wonder that in the days of Jehoiakim, about 600 years before the time of Christ, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, was permitted by God to come up against Jerusalem and to lay siege against it and overcome it. It was probably at this time that Daniel, with some of the young princes, was carried away as a captive. A few years later, when Jehoiachin was king, Nebuchadnezzar came up against Jerusalem again and carried away many of the temple vessels and took several thousand captives. And even later, when Zedekiah was king, Nebuchadnezzar came a third time against Jerusalem to besiege it. This time he burned the city with fire, broke down its walls, slaughtered many of the people, and probably carried away another batch of captives to the banks of the Euphrates. 2 Kings 25, verses 1 through 11. Among the earlier captives taken by the king of Babylon in the days of Jehoiakim were 4 young men. Like Timothy in later times, they may have had godly mothers who taught them the law of the Lord. Or they may perhaps have been touched by the words of Jeremiah, the weeping prophet, whom God had sent to the people of Judah. So, even though the nation rejected the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Moses, these young men took him as their God. They received him into their hearts. Many may have mocked Jeremiah when he warned them and lifted up his voice against the sins of the people. They may have laughed at his tears and told him to his face that he was causing undue excitement, just as people say of earnest preachers today. But these 4 young men seemed to have listened to the prophet's voice, and they had the strength to stand for God. In spite of their faithfulness, they were captives in Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar, the king, commanded that a certain number of the most promising of the young Jewish captives be chosen to be taught the Chaldean tongue and instructed in the learning of Babylon. The king further ordered that there should be portions of meat from his table set before them daily, with a supply of the same wine as he himself drank. This was to continue for 3 years. Daniel 1:5. At the end of 3 years, these young men were to stand before the great monarch, the ruler over the whole world at that time. Daniel and his 3 young friends were among those thus selected. Scripture. And Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with a portion of the king's food, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Daniel 1:8. No young man ever goes from a country home to a large city or a great metropolis without serious temptations crossing his path on his entrance. And just at this turning point in a young man's life, as in Daniel's, must lie the secret of his success or his failure. The cause of many of the failures that we see in life is that men do not start right. Daniel, however, started right. He took his character with him to Babylon, and was not ashamed of the religion of his father and his mother. He was not ashamed of the God of the Bible. Among those heathen idolaters in Babylon, he was not ashamed to let his light shine. The young Hebrew captive took his stand for God as he entered the gate of Babylon, and doubtless he cried to God to keep him steadfast. And he needed to cry hard, for he had to face great difficulties, as we shall see.